Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus A330 pilot, and welcome to our FMS setup tutorial for the iniBuilds Airbus A330 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Do note that this video is not going to cover some of the long-haul aspects of the FMS setup, as that is going to be for a dedicated long-haul video. So, let's go right into it. We are actually going to start the FMS setup on our electronic flight bag, because in here we need to import our SimBrief flight plan, and over here we can also load up the aircraft with passengers and fuel. So let's hit the SimBrief import button on the top right, and then we can also verify our operational flight plan to show down here. Last but not least, we can go down into the payload screen, and on here also click the SimBrief import button. And over here we can adjust our fuel and payload as needed. For the purpose of today's video, let's slightly increase the fuel load over here to something like 19 tons, and then let's go to apply load and load that instantly. Now, more on that a little bit later on in a dedicated video. For now, let's go on to the FMS setup, and we are going to start it right from the bottom over here. In order to make our life a little bit easier, I am going to open the flight plan in a dedicated window on the left hand side here, so that we can see everything in a good and orderly manner. So we start our FMS setup by clicking on the FM1 button in the MCDU menu, and over here we cross-check our aircraft type, which today is the A330-300, with the correct engines, and we make sure that our nav database is current. Next up, we are going to go to the stored waypoints and routes and hit delete all and confirm that, in order to remove anything that the previous crew might have stored, so that we have all the waypoint names and all the routes available once again. Next, we check any scratchpad message that we see in here, and once we have read and understood them, we can clear them away. Be aware that any cleared message cannot be recalled, so be sure that you go through these slowly and make sure that you actually understand any of them. So, aircraft position invalid. Then we've got nav accuracy upgraded, since our IRS alignment is already complete. Downgraded, that should no longer be there. Align IRS is also done. GPS primary. Weights cleared. Okay, thank you very much. So, once the status page and the scratchpad messages are dealt with, we can hit the init button, which leads us to the init page where we enter our route. Now, let's make our life easy and hit the init request button. In order to be able to do this, you must have entered a SimBrief ID on the aircraft's electronic flight bag, and a valid SimBrief flight plan must have been created. So, we've got an AOC route uplink, message understood, clear that away. Now, let's go ahead and check that any of the data that has been uplinked is correct. Do note that incorrect data uplinks occur every now and then and are a common phenomenon in the real aircraft, so check all the data carefully. And you will notice that some incorrect uplinks actually also happen in the virtual aircraft. So, starting at the top, we are going from Frankfurt to Palma de Mallorca, and our alternate is Barcelona. Now, our flight number is Ocean 512 in here, but look at the flight plan, it should be Ocean 6 Lima Mike. In other words, there is our first incorrect uplink, so let's correct that by typing Ocean 6 Lima Mike and inserting that on our flight number field. Be aware that even though it says flight number over here, this must always be the ATC call sign that you can find in your flight plan. The cost index is 10 and the cruise flight level 390, both of which checks against our flight plan. So, from here we can move on to the flight plan page, and we start entering our SID. Now, we are planned for the Annecy to Lima departure today, which is off runway 18. So let's go on to the lateral revision of the departure airport, and then we can hit the departure key. And over here in the list we can use the arrow keys up and down to stroll through the different runways until we find the departure runway we need, which is runway 18 today. Select the SID that you want to fly, and in case there are any transitions available, select the transitions as needed. So, verify that our entry is correct, so runway 18, Aniki to Lima, and then we can hit the insert button to insert that SID into our flight plan. A small bug in the iniBuilds at the moment is that a discontinuity is always inserted after the SID. This is not correct to the real world, this should not happen. However, in the sim we can clear that discon away. Now from here, we can go down to the lateral revision of the destination airport and then hit the arrival key, and over here we are going to enter our expected approach. We can see in the flight plan that we've got the Lunik to Papa arrival planned, and the approach itself is going to be the ILS Zulu approach onto runway 24 left. So use the arrow keys as needed to find the approach in question, which today is the ILS Zulu runway 24 left. And then we can once again use the arrow keys in order to navigate to the star that we want to fly, which is going to be the Lunik to Papa arrival today. When that is selected, we can select the transition as needed, and do note that the transitions showing down here are transitions leading on to the star. If you're looking for the approach transitions, then we've got to hit the approach via button on the top left, and this leads us to the available approach transitions. And we happen to know that the Lunik to Papa arrival ends at Cap de Pera VOR, so we are going to select that one for our approach via. Once again, we verify our entry up here, and when everything is correct, we are going to hit the insert button. We are going to continue on the secondary flight plan, and over here we want to enter our emergency SID, so our engine failure procedure. Now let's go ahead and hit the secondary flight plan button, and we're going to press copy active. In the real world, we would now enter the emergency waypoint over here. In the simulator, unfortunately, we need to use a little trick at the time of this recording in order to create the emergency waypoint first. We can do this on the data page, arrow to the right, stored waypoints, and over here we can add new waypoints to our database. In our case today, we are going to use the waypoint Frankfurt X-ray 3. So FRA stands for the airport, X, emergency, 3, because runway 18 happens to be the third in the alphabet for the departure runways. So enter that up here, and as you can see, if the waypoint is not known, you can now define it down here. So we are going to use the place bearing distance format in order to do that. So let's enter the departure runway, Frankfurt 18, slash, now comes the bearing, which is our runway heading, 176, slash, and now the distance, 25 miles, as we want to proceed straight ahead for 25 miles. Enter that over here, and now we can hit the store key, and now the new waypoint has been added to our nav database. So going back to the secondary flight plan, copy active, and now we can enter that emergency waypoint. So Frankfurt emergency 3, and we can add that just below the departure runway. And now we've got that waypoint added on the extended center line. Next up, we want to create a holding at that point. So we go to the lateral revision of that waypoint, then we press the hold key, and over here, by default, it will have holdings in the database, and at this waypoint it's got 176 right-hand turns. The only thing we need to adjust is the timing, as we by default want 1 minute lag times below 14,000 feet. So after that is inserted, we hit return, and now we want to define the immediate re-landing if needed. So we go to the lateral revision of the emergency waypoint, below the holding, over here, and then we enter new destination, Echo Delta Delta Foxtrot, which is our departure airport. So enter that over here, and now our destination has been replaced, and we can do an immediate return to Frankfurt. Again, lateral revision, arrival, scroll down for the approach you want, in our case ILS Zulu runway 25 center, and we can hit insert over here. Now this flight plan contains our engine out SID, so straight ahead for 25 miles to the Frankfurt emergency 3 point, and then the ILS approach to runway 25 center in case an immediate return is needed. Some pilots also hit the secondary flight plan page again, go to performance, and then next page all the way to the approach page, and then enter the current weather information of the airport on here so that it's really completely prepared for an immediate re-landing. Some do this, others don't. It's not in the FCOM that you have to do this. Now once the secondary flight plan is set up, we go to the RadNav page, and in here we can tune any VOR or NDB needed for our departure. Today we do not need any, so the last thing for us to do is to return back to the flight plan page, then go to the lateral revision of the departure airport again, and then on the right hand side onto the fix info page. This can be used in order to draw an extended center line or to visualize your engine out SID on your nav display. We are going to do just that. So first of all, we are going to draw an extended center line. We do this by adding our departure airport and runway, so Frankfurt 18 into here, and then we draw a radial on the runway track from here. So that's going to be 176, put that into the radial, and what this does is to create this blue line that you can see on the nav display right down here, which is our extended center line. We also want to add the emergency waypoint, so let's click the arrow to the right in order to get to the next page. And now we also enter the emergency point that we have just created. So let's go ahead and put that right over here. Now this concludes the entry of the lateral data into the FMS. In the real world, we now go into data, next page, stored route, and in here we would store our route, because that opens a very nice screen where you have an overview of every waypoint followed by each airway and the SID and the STAR. You would use that to verify that your entire route is entered correctly. At the time of this recording, this is unfortunately not simulated in the iniBuilds Airbus A330. Last but not least, we go back to the flight plan page and check the distance down here, 709 miles, against the distance that we have on the flight plan, in our case 706 miles, and there can be small differences like a couple miles, which is completely normal. However, there shouldn't be large differences. Say for example, if this read 900 miles and the FMS had 700, then you would know something is wrong with the route you entered. Now that the route has been entered, let's go ahead and cross-check that our route is actually correct. We're going to do this through the electronic flight bag and the charts that we have already prepared during our preliminary cockpit preparation. So let's open our SID chart and have a look. So the Aneki to Lima departure goes straight ahead to 800 feet. And we've got the runway and then 800 feet. And then we go southbound towards Delta Foxtrot 101, which has a 220 knot speed restriction on it. And we can see in here Delta Fox 101 with a 220 knot restriction. Be aware that there is currently a small bug here, showing them in green. They should be magenta, like the altitude restriction you see over there. So, from Delta Fox 101, we continue towards Aneki, and in here we continue towards Aneki as well. At this moment, unfortunately, the procedural text chart is not available, as that would include your initial climb altitude, but more on that at a later point in time. Now that we've checked our SIDs to be correct, which you can also do on the nav display, so if you go into the plan mode and select the constraints on the EFIS control panel, then you can also visually check your SID over here. So you could, for example, open the chart at the same time, and then you could just scroll through it like that and verify all the restrictions, which show nicely over here or over here, and you could verify all of those to be correct for your SID as well. Some pilots do use the arrow keys to navigate through the entire flight plan in order to verify that there are no gross errors in here as well, which is something that you can do. Some pilots do, other pilots don't. Alright, now let's go back into the FMS setup. Now that all the route has been entered, we are going to continue entering our performance data. And we are going to start that by going to the init page and then clicking the right hand arrow key. Do note that this page is only accessible if the engines are stopped. If your engines are running, you can no longer access this page, but you can use the fuel prediction page when your engines are shut down. So let's go in it, next page, and over here we start with a zero fuel weight entry, which is 156.9 today, so 156.9, and then we also enter the zero fuel weight center of gravity. Now, provided that your boarding is still in progress and you don't know the final value yet, we enter 25 as default, so /25, and we put that up here. The block fuel equals the fuel that we have ordered from our refueler, so 18 tons in today's case. It is worth to compare this with your ecam so that you can note any deviations. Today, for example, you can see we've got 19.1 over here, so let's go ahead and actually enter 19.1. So going down then, we have the trip wind down here, and the trip wind is located on our flight plan over here and represents the average wind component, which, as we can see over here, plus 10 equals a tailwind of 10 knots. So we're going to enter tail 10 down here. Next we move on to the fuel figures on the left. In order to verify that we indeed have sufficient fuel on board, we're going to enter the figures from our flight plan into our FMS, so that the extra fuel and time prediction down here is correct. So let's start. We can see that our planned taxi fuel is 408 kilos, which we round to 0.5, and we enter that on the top left. Then we continue with the route reserve, which is today 500 kilos, so we enter 0.5. In the real world, that's all you need to enter. In the simulation, you need to put a slash behind it, like this. Next up, we have the alternate fuel, which is 3.2. So 3.2. And then we've got the final reserve fuel, which is 2.2 today, and we have 2.2 in here. Now, with all of that entered, we can read the extra fuel and time value on the bottom right. Note, however, that especially if the step climbs have not been entered on a long haul, this value might show rather incorrect. So if this shows you something slightly negative on the ground, that is no reason to worry. In flight, it's usually going to fix itself. Once the fuel predictions have been entered, we can move on to the performance page, and over here we are going to enter our takeoff data. Now, if you are lazy, you can simply uplink them from the electronic flight bag. In the real world, however, that cannot be done, so let's go over the manual entry procedure. On the takeoff page down here, once you have done your takeoff calculations, you can simply press send to FMGS, and that is going to update those figures automatically. In the simulation, however, or in the real world, we don't have these features, so especially in the absence of a load sheet, we are going to make some preliminary entries. Those are started with the flaps configuration and the flex temperature. So flaps 2 and flex temperature 60 degrees. Then on the left side, we are going to enter our takeoff speeds, which are 158, 162, 164. So 158, 162, and 164. We continue down here, checking that the transition altitude is correct, and you can find the transition altitude on the bottom right of the Lido departure chart. So down here we can see transition altitude 5000, which is in here and correct. Next, we check the thrust reduction and acceleration altitudes, which normally are 1000 above the airfield elevation for noise abatement procedure number 2. Field elevation Frankfurt round about 340 feet. For that reason, we've got 1340 reduction, 1340 acceleration. The engine out acceleration by default should be 1500 above the ground, so we can correct this as needed. So today we enter 1840 into here. We also compare the minimum clean speed with the speed from our electronic flight bag. So we've got 212 knots showing over here, and unfortunately we don't see a calculation for that on the iniBuilds performance calculator, but in case you are using a different system such as the calculator from SimBrief, then you might find that value for comparison. When we're done with that, we hit the next page, and in here we are going to enter the D-rated climb. Now, the A330 has two D-rates available. It's got full thrust, then you have D-rate 1 and D-rate 2. D-rate 1 represents a 10% reduction of the climb thrust compared to the maximum, and D-rate 2 is a 15% reduction. We have a simple rule to tell us which D-rate to use. If our takeoff weight is 200 tons or less, which is the case today, we're going to use the D-rate 2. If our takeoff weight is above 200 tons, we are going to use D-rate 1. Full climb thrust is basically not used. So today, since we're below 200 tons, D2 is going to be entered right into here. If at any point you need to remove this again, you can simply go ahead, press the clear button and remove the entry up here, and that's going to restore full climb thrust immediately. Well, and with this we have finished our FMS preparation. I do hope that you have enjoyed this one. Now, once the FMS preparation is completed, we are going to move up to the glare shield panel and set the glare shield up. So basically we want the flight directors on both sides. We are going to set the correct QNH, so 1032 today. We select the arc mode, and usually 10 is the range for takeoff. Constraints are normally selected for takeoff, and then moving on to the FCU, the flight control unit, we ensure that all the modes are managed, so the 3 dashes and the dot are showing. And just in case you don't see any managed modes over here, ensure that the flight director is actually turned on. Next up, we set our initial climb altitude, which is 4,000 feet today, and whenever an altitude has been set, we switch the selector back to the 100 position. The background for this is that in case we accidentally make an input over here, a value that does not represent a usual cleared altitude, such as 4,000, 5,000, etc. So something like 4,100 is much easier noticeable. So for this reason we always use the 100 position. The first officer gets the same EFIS setup as the captain, making sure we select the VORs as well. And when that is done, the last part of our setup is going to be the side console. Over here we've got the oxygen mask where we can conduct the oxygen test, so press the test button down there. Thereafter we're going to press and hold the emergency button, and then press the press to test button down here, and we should see the cross for the airflow for at least 5 seconds. Release the button, and thereafter we can close the oxygen mask panel. Moving further forward, the pedal disconnect button on the tiller is up, and last but not least we've got the side panel over here where we can make our selections as needed. So foot warmer is always a nice thing. The console light up the area down here. Normally we keep them off. The map light is the area over here, and the ceiling light is a very interesting one, lighting the aircraft up over here. And this concludes our setup. I do hope that you like this one. In the next video we are going to have a look at some backgrounds, typical weights for an A330, and last but not least the takeoff performance calculation. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope that you learned something today. As always, be sure to leave your like and comment underneath the video, and if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate to see you subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. If you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. And with that out of the way, thank you very much. Like, comment and subscribe, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.